just talk about your time.
Okay. I could go hide a little.
So, what is going on, guys? Your host, Nico Sharp here, alongside CJ Sharp, here for another episode of Sharp Segments. We're going to be breaking down UFC 309, Stipe Miocic versus Jon Jones. This card is going to be super exciting, and this card is going to be a little more special here in this podcast because we are going to be traveling to New York City, going to Madison Square Garden, and able to watch this fight live. Super excited about it, CJ. Can't
Yep.
wait to go.
Same here, man. It's been a while. When's the last fight we went to? Was it 22?
I think it was 22. It was trying to be a yearly tradition where we'd go in November and go to Madison Square Garden, but we went a couple times. Then we missed a year, so now we're trying to
Yeah.
get back on track. And Siege, not a bad card to try to get back on track in Madison
Not
Square Garden.
bad at all. Not at all. Super pumped.
Yeah, it's gonna be super exciting. So you have Jon Jones, you have Stipe Miocic, arguably the GOAT. A lot of things going on here. This card has so much to offer. It's got stylistic matchups such as boxing versus jiu-jitsu, wrestling versus jiu-jitsu. I mean, everything you can imagine. This card has it, and this card has a lot of stipulations going. A lot of guys, younger guys fighting older guys. A lot of matchups. It's going to be interesting, Siege, and just want to hear your thoughts on how this card was structured.
Yeah. Well, obviously everything was built around Jones, right? I mean, we were going to be here talking about this whether it was Jones and Aspinall or Jones and anybody else, really. So I think you build any card around that man, it's going to be exciting. And it wasn't always that way, right? I mean, Jones for us, for the MMA guys, has always been the GOAT of our sport, but he always hasn't always drawn this attention, right? It's not really until he started leaning into just being Jones instead of being the overly nice guy, back when he was squeaky cleaner, that was his image, and now that we're here and, he's, just letting loose and we're getting to see who he really is, it's very exciting. Yeah. And then you put guys like Oliveira on that same card and Bo Nickal, who's surging right now. I mean, you're going to have a fun time.
Yeah, this card is absolutely stacked. There's a lot of question marks on, did the fans want, should it have been Aspinall versus Jones? But we'll get to that just a little bit later. A lot of question marks there and a lot of interesting matchups that Jones could have potentially had, possibly could have in the future. But again, we'll get to the main event eventually. That's going to be, that's going to be a conversation of its own. But CJ, let's break down the first fight of the night. It's going to be James Lontop versus Mauricio Ruffy. What have you seen in this card opener?
So going down to Ruffy. So I wasn't overly experienced with Ruffy, or I hadn't really noticed him a whole lot. So I had to go back and do some research, only to find out he's only had one fight in the UFC. And rewatching that looked amazing. Super exciting guy, clean, and he's not ranked, but I don't think it's going to be very long before he has a number next to his name, and looks great. Unfortunately, James Lontop, another guy that I'm not too familiar with, had to go back and do a little research and not really liking what I'm seeing. He only has two fights in the UFC, both losses, and looks like he got just clean wiped out. So it makes you wonder if this is one of those just kind of buffer fights for Mauricio. They're just trying to, shine him up, make him look good, give him a couple throwaways. My initial thought was, okay, I'm excited. This guy's nickname is Goku. Anything Dragon Ball Z related, I'm going to be excited about.
Of course.
And then I go back and look at the fight. It's like, it's, I don't know. I don't really see a whole lot there, from the one fight that I saw Mauricio in. He looks like he'd be too much, and it really goes to show the level of competition, right? And when it comes to the UFC, because it makes you realize that it doesn't matter how many fights you've had prior to the UFC, the level of that competition definitely matters. And Lontop's had a ton of fights coming in, but then he gets to UFC and so far he's been cold. Not a whole lot's been going for him. So, we'll see if this is a pickup and maybe I'm wrong, but really liking Mauricio on this one.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely talk about Ruffy and how exciting he is. But let's break down Lontop just a little bit. He's a 14-4 fighter. He's got 0-2 in the UFC, 1-2 adding the Contender Series matchup he had against Malik Lewis back in 2023. So if you look at that fight against Malik Lewis, more of a striker battle, that was a super exciting fight. When you rewatch that fight and you watch that for the first time, you kind of raise eyebrows at Lontop a little bit. He was a very exciting. He was always pushing forward, had that dirty boxing, loved to work in the clinch, work elbows. And so that's what got him to sign with the UFC. And then you put him up against a matchup in Chris Padilla, who is a wrestler. He's going to take you down. He's going to try and submit you. And that wasn't Lontop's, forte, even though he does have a submission on his card. But again, more of a striker. He has 7 knockouts to the only 1 submission lost. So again, a Padilla matchup wasn't in his favor, and the same thing for Porchev. Again, it's just not his style. So when he is going to be up on his feet, I think he's going to look a lot better. He looked really fresh. And he's, a guy from Peru. They talk about the climate all the time. So his box, his energy box never runs out. His gas tank is always seems to be full. And you saw that in the Malik Lewis fight. Hasn't been able to show that in the UFC yet. So I'm super excited to see what he can show. But when you watch Mauricio Ruffy, again, I don't want to make picks. We'll wait for Sharp's pick just a little bit later. But Mauricio Ruffy is a guy who seems to have it all going. You watch that fight against Malarkey, like the one you were mentioning just a second ago, and his striking was, pure. He's having fun.
He looked slick everywhere. He looked great. He looked composed. He looked seasoned. Nothing looked like it was an issue for him anywhere he took it. He's doing some off-the-wall stuff and rolling in for takedowns at legs and whatnot. And and so he looked like he was having fun, which is not what you normally see from a guy first time on UFC. He's just trying to get in there, get that win, put that first fight behind him and move on. But he looked comfortable. He looked slick. And again, going back to James, right? It's, we see strikers come in and it is mixed martial arts, and so no matter how much we say that, there's guys that are going to, excel in certain areas. And what you normally want to see from your strikers at the very least is, okay, they're not gonna go out there and take guys down and beat them up, but at the very least stop the takedowns.
Right.
And you mentioned what Chris Padilla did to him. It's like, okay, that's not your forte, but at the very least stay on your feet. Let's see something else out of you. And it just seemed like that really exposed some holes in his game.
Yeah, it really did. He was able to stuff a few, but it was Padilla getting that submission victory. But with the two stylistic in this matchup, it could give Lontop that better look than he did against Padilla. Mauricio Ruffy, again, a guy who was 10-1 in his MMA career, 2-0 in the UFC, or 1-0 in the UFC, 1 win coming off the Contender Series. But CJ, when you look at his professional career, 10-1, 10 finishes, 10 knockouts or TKOs on his record.
Right.
He's a highlight. He's a walking highlight, a guy who I guarantee you after the more fights you watch, the more fans he is going to develop. And I can imagine after this fight, there's going to be a whole lot of people talking about Mauricio Ruffy. And he's having that little bit of hype now. And you watched the Malarkey fight, it was Dean Thomas comparing him to Conor McGregor a little bit with how precise he was. I wanted to hear what you maybe thought of, and if you heard that in the first round.
And so what was funny about that is the first time I watched it with the volume off. I just wanted to see what he was doing. And I remember watching it thinking, there was McGregor vibes, right? It just the looseness, the fluidity. And even, there was a lot of that happening. And then I went back and watched it again with the commentary. I was like, "Hold, I'm not crazy. I'm seeing this too." It wasn't just, and the slight looks at certain angles, like he kind of has a McGregor build, So yeah, man, it definitely gave me goosebumps looking at that. So it's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, super exciting. And that wasn't the only time he got compared to Conor McGregor. Even back when you look at the Contender Series fight, the Season 7 Week 9 fight, that when he fought Raymond Magomedov, it was Laura from the Contender Series comparing him to Conor McGregor again. So
wow,
in comparison to young Conor McGregor, and you saw what young Conor McGregor looks like. How exciting is this fight? This is going to be a big challenge for him on the feet. We'll see if James Lontop can slow down that high pace he has, and we've seen that Lontop can go forever. His conditioning runs forever. So super exciting fight. Can't make a pick yet. Not time for sharp picks yet.
Right,
We're going to wait just a little bit longer. But let's look at the next fight. It's the one and only women's bout on this main card. It's going to be Karine Silva taking on Viviane Araujo. Super interesting fight stylistically as well. CJ, what did you see here?
So I actually want you to fill me in on these two ladies. You know, no disrespect. I didn't have a whole lot of time to get brushed up on them. I'm
Sure.
completely unfamiliar with either one of them. So
So
what should I be looking for in this fight?
So when you look at Karine Silva, she's going to be in the blue corner. Young fighter. She's 30 years old, in her prime in that 125 division. She currently sits at 18-4, 5 fights in UFC, 5-0. 4-0, again, with one in the Contender Series, let me be clear. And
Okay.
she has been super slick on the ground as well as on the feet. She kind of reminds me of Shavkat Rakhmonov in the way of she has 9 knockout wins, 8 submissions. So she can do it all.
Just
And you
a
watch,
dominator. Yeah.
she's a dominator. Wherever she wants the fight to take it, that's where she'll go. And you saw that in the Araujo de Silva fight. Her striking was beautiful, low leg kicks, chopping down the lead leg of de Silva, and then shooting for a takedown. And when she got a knockdown, it wasn't like, oh, I can't go into the guard because that's not my. No, wherever she wants to take the fight, she will take it
She was
there.
comfortable.
She was. She as soon as Silva got knocked, she was taking her down and she was controlling the fight there. Two of her last 3 fights or victories were by submission. And one of those is because she got them wobbled and took her down and completed the submission. Now let's
Nice.
look at Viviane Araujo. She's another girl who likes the clinch work. She's a little bit older. She's at 37, so her prime is a little bit further away. She needs this
Yeah.
victory bad, but loves the clinch work, works the close game again. She's works the close games, and she hasn't showed too much activity in the fight against Natalia Silva in her last fight and ended up losing by decision. But she's an exciting fighter in the fact that stylistically she could take down and control the ground game as well. An older fighter, a fighter who's been through it. She's 6-5 in the UFC, 12-6 overall, and to a smaller standard, 3 knockout victories versus 4 submissions. So she's kind of got it
Sure.
all bounced around too.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, sounds like it'll be a fun one.
Yeah, should be pretty interesting. And again, Araujo, she's a veteran fighter. She's been there, she's done that, and she's fought some of the best. I mean, she's fought Alexa Grasso way back in the day. She's fought Amanda Ribas, Jennifer Maia, fighters who have been there, and she got the victory over Jennifer Maia. She did lose to Grasso by decision. She went to Ribas. She lost by decision. She's been there, done that, fought the top contenders, and now she has another rising one coming in Karine
So
Silva.
close, contentious fights. You know, she's losing to big names, but she's not getting just wiped out of there. She's, staying in there, hanging in, and okay.
Right, yeah.
Nice.
She's been there, done that. She's fought the best of them. Always close fights, but she hasn't been finished in any of those fights. She's right there with them, and you see what Grasso, Jennifer Maia, and Amanda Ribas have done in their careers, and that was back in 2022 she fought Grasso. So now already consistently moving her game up. So should be a pretty
Nice. Look forward to
interesting.
it.
Yeah,
Hell yeah.
it's the one and only women's card or woman fight on the main card. And you want to talk about stylistic matchups, Siege? Let's go to the next fight. You have the classic wrestler versus a jiu-jitsu fighter. And I know you have strong
Yeah.
opinions on this one. You have Paul Craig taking
Yes.
on the wrestler from Penn State, Bo Nickal. Jiu-jitsu guy with Paul Craig, wrestler with Bo Nickal. How do you see that one showdown? Without giving your pick, what have you seen
Right.
this-
And so I think it was hard to say this is the fight I'm most excited about, with the other two following, but
Right.
super excited about Bo Nickal getting a huge bump in the opponent, right? Because he's been fighting a lot of, again, no disrespect to any of his previous opponents, but a lot of no names, just tune-up fights, and he's just been walking through them, so feels like the first legitimate test that he's had so far. Craig, who doesn't have a number next to his name, does he?
I don't
Not
believe so.
anymore.
No, he
You know,
did.
and yeah, and he's been around the UFC for a while now. He had some success at light heavyweight, and with a few back-to-back losses, decided to move down to middleweight, and looked good initially coming into middleweight, right? And then what did we have? We have two big losses at light heavyweight before he moved down to middleweight,
Right.
and he had that one win, but now he's on a 2-fight losing streak. But he does have some notable wins in his book too, right? He has that win against Jamal Hill
Right.
with the breaking the forearm there.
Yeah.
Finished that one.
Super
He has
gross.
that win over Ankalaev.
Yep, Magomed
You know,
Ankalaev back
so
in 2021.
Paul
Yep.
Craig is by no means a scrub. You know, he's had a
No.
up and down career. You know, but this is going to be a big test for Bo Nickel, which is exciting to see. I want to see Bo Nickal get pushed a little bit. He's hardly been out of the second round, you know, and I think he's only seen the second round once.
Yep, as his last
Maybe.
fight against Cody Brundage. Yep.
Yeah, so he's only seen the second round once, and even at that, it wasn't like, oh man, he was, could have went either way. He was
Right.
winning that fight pretty handily up until
For
that
sure.
point.
Mhm.
So I'm looking to see a good fight out of this. Yeah, man, I feel bad for Paul Craig because I am a fan. I like what he does in there, but he's had a tough past couple fights. So
Yeah, he's had a couple of tough fights, but when you look at the last two guys he lost to, it was Brendan Allen and Caio Baralho or Baralho. I
Yeah.
forget how to pronounce his last name. Baralho.
yeah.
We just saw him fight again this past weekend, actually, getting another huge victory. And so another one of those fighting nerds who are getting it done and super exciting to watch. And he's losing by close. You watch that Brendan Allen fight, and that was such a good fight. Brendan Allen is such a tough matchup for anybody. And then you see what Caio's doing now in the UFC. Those guys are both, two younger guys who are getting it done, and their careers are flourishing. So you can't even shame on Paul Craig on that too much, especially when you see what he's done. He beat Magomed Ankalaev, who is now a contender for that light heavyweight. Jamal Hill, who was a former light heavyweight champion, getting two big wins against them. And yeah, we're not even talking about what he did to Jamal Hill and did to Jamal Hill's arm. That was unbelievable. And I remember he got on my radar a little bit with the Ankalaev fight, but then after that Jamal Hill fight, I was like, I really am scared of this guy because you watch him in the weigh-ins, he has his face painted, and when you saw what he did to Jamal Hill, it was like, oh, you're really scary, but I don't know if I ever want to watch you fight again because that was gross. And you know what you're doing, and wow, that you're terrifying. You're a terrifying fighter to watch, and scary.
And it's just tough to go from that to back losses, you know.
Yep.
And maybe a smart move. Maybe there's something that he saw at light heavyweight that he's like, you know what, I don't know if I like this because he looks solid at light heavyweight, but even at middleweight, he looks like a pretty, good sized middleweight too.
Huge
maybe
guy.
He was fighting up a little bit there, and maybe decided, middleweight's his true weight. I know he's a little older, so it's always interesting when you see these older fighters go down in weight because normally you hear the exact opposite. Normally, as fighters age, they want to go up. They don't want to do all that weight cutting, and albeit Jones and all these other fighters, they prefer to go up and just kind of coast through at that point. But now he decided to go the opposite route, and maybe this is where he feels more comfortable. What do you think it's going to take for Bo Nickel to get somebody in the top 10? Do you think a win over Paul Craig does that? Even though Paul Craig isn't ranked, he is a notable opponent. Does this get him somebody in the top 10?
I feel like it would have to, and back to your point earlier, it was Cody Brundage and Val Woodburn and Jamie Pickett, I think, are his fights in the UFC. And again, the guys who, they're in the UFC, right? You can't knock avoid. They're some of those talented.
They made it this far, yeah.
Yeah, they're some of those talented fighters in the world, but they're not Bo Nickel, right? Bo Nickel with that strong wrestling background, his striking seems to be improving every single time he fights. So if you were to beat a guy like Paul Craig, and it kind of depends, and it's hard to say it depends, but how does he beat Paul Craig? Does he decide to strike? Does he go into the wrestling game? Now, if he out-wrestles and he takes down Paul Craig and beats him on the ground, submits him in some way, wow, right? That would be unbelievable. So I'm interested to see how Bo Nickel gets it done, but it's hard to deny if he beats Paul Craig that you deny him from a top 10 number by his name.
Bo Nickel's fun to listen to, and he's constantly calling out the top guys. And when you see what he's doing with the guys that are being put in front of him, it's like, how much longer can you really deny him,
Right.
It is hard when I've heard him do certain interviews and he's made comments like, oh, I want to take it slow, or something to that effect. I don't want to get rushed along and I want to keep learning. As a fan, I'm like, F that. Let's go for the top. Let's, because he's saying that, but at the same time saying how easily he would handle Chimaev or how easily he would handle these other guys. So it's like, which one is it, man? Do you want us to push for you to get the top spot, or do you want to take it slow and we'll talk about it in 5 years from now, So, but yeah, I definitely want to see a top 10 if this is a decisive victory, like you said, right? And I really don't care how he gets it. If he happens to knock out Paul Craig, or strangle him, either which way, if it's decisive, I think how can you deny him that top 10 guy?
Yeah, totally. Again, it's hard to deny when you have a guy in front of you like Paul Craig, how dangerous he is at any given moment. So I guess it doesn't. It may not depend on how he gets it done, but it's just if he can go down the ground and somehow beat Paul Craig. I mean, how do you not? I mean, he's a
And make a
top
statement.
7
Yeah.
contender. I mean, he's ready for. How do you deny that kind of ground game goes up against a jiu-jitsu guy of all things, a submission threat at all times, a guy who's comfortable on his back, and if you wrestle him and take him to the ground, what more can you say for Paul Craig? Who's stopping him at that point, right? Is it going to? The only thing you want to see is that Chimaev fight, right? But
Yep.
I mean, we're getting way ahead of ourselves. Let's take care of Paul Craig first. But wow, whew, I mean, see, this card is unbelievable. It's getting me excited just thinking about it.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're going to be there, it's unbelievable. I'm getting beside myself. I can't wait I can't even think about it. And also on that point, we're going to be doing a series while we're at the fight. We're going to be shooting to you live from New York City. Going to be doing a couple different things. Going to be shooting to you guys live, posting it right after the fight. Just a little breakdown of us at the fight, breaking it down while inside Madison Square Garden, showing off, New York City, showing you guys what fight weekend looks like in Madison Square Garden. Going to give you guys a little behind the scenes look.
Heck yeah.
Whew, let's dig into this co-main event. A fight, the only rematch of this main card. You have Michael Chandler taking on Charles do Bronx Oliveira. A fight we've already seen before, and it was for a belt. Charles Oliveira getting the win in that first bout, but now they're running it back. Michael Chandler taking some time off. We thought he was going to fight Conor McGregor. That fight never came to fruition. Now we have this fight. How do we see it going?
So, man, yeah, that's a lot. I feel like you said it all, but I don't know if it could. Where do you even start with this one? I mean, shit, I'm just at a loss for words. I just remember how exciting the. All right, let me start with Chandler. How about that?
Yep, let's do it.
Chandler's one of those guys where, we went through this with the last breakdown that we had, and I was going on and on about Max Holloway. But with Max, it was more, I was expecting Max to win, heartbroken he didn't win.
Right.
With Chandler, I'm a huge fan, but I'm a fan of Chandler's no matter what the outcome is. Not that I'm not a fan because Max lost, but I mean, I'm just excited to see Chandler fight because it's going to be fireworks one way or another.
Right.
I mean, he got knocked out the last time he was out against Oliveira, but his fights are always exciting. That fight could have went either way. He was seconds away from winning the belt in the first fight, right?
Absolutely.
Then he went on from that to, was it Poirier right? No. He fought Hooker first. Then he got Oliveira second, right? Right after Dan Hooker.
Yes, it was Dan Hooker, Oliveira, and then that's when he fought Gaethje at Madison Square Garden.
Crazy fight.
Yep.
Which weren't we there for that?
Yep, we were there for that.
That's what I thought. That fight was insane.
Yep.
And again, you don't have to. It's fights like those. You just need one of those, and you're rooting for Chandler to be on the card.
You're a lifelong fan.
Win, lose, or otherwise. Yeah, an amazing guy. Not always the smartest fighter. Just throwing caution to the wind most of the time, but entertaining nonetheless, right? And so, again, whether it was him and Gaethje, he lost to Gaethje. Still an amazing fight of the year, I think, that year. Or at least a contender for fight of the year.
It had to be. In my book, it was. I mean, nonetheless.
Right. Yeah. And then him and Poirier, amazing fight. The incredibly terrible still that we all have of him kicking Tony Ferguson in the face, and golly, it's like the wins he does get, it's like I feel like he needs a win like this to really solidify him as to be more than just an entertaining fighter. If he's really in the title hunt, he needs to win against a guy like Oliveira, who's 1-2 in his last fights, right? He only lost to Sarukian last. Yep. But before that, he
beat Dariush.
That was the one. That was the one I was surprised by because I had Dariush in that fight.
Me too.
Yeah. So I feel like, if he wants to be more than just an exciting fighter, this is a fight that he has to win. But it's going to be fireworks. There's no way it's not. I mean, it's going to be an amazing fight.
Yeah, you have your fighters like Gaethje, Chandler, and you just know that no matter what happens, like you mentioned, it's not going to be a boring fight. They don't produce boring fights. No. And even the fights he lost, you brought up Poirier, you brought up Gaethje, and you brought up Oliveira. You look at, especially those Gaethje and Oliveira fights. I mean, those guys are the top of the lightweight division and have been, and they'll go down as some of the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
Right? And in those fights, and specifically we'll talk about Gaethje and Oliveira, he had them wobbled. He had them hurt. He was seconds away from winning both. Right? So then what are we talking about? Now he's beaten Gaethje and he's beaten Oliveira. Where does he go in his career if he finds a way to finish those fights, right? He was seconds away from getting the win in both. Right?
Yeah.
So you covered Chandler. Let me talk a little bit about Oliveira. So Charles Oliveira is a guy who's been in the UFC for forever, it seems like, right? I mean, he fought, El Cucuy, and that's when he first kind of got on most people's radar back in 2020, but he's been fighting back since 2010. That's when his first UFC fight was, and so he's been fighting for forever. But so he's been kind of having an up and down career, having some losses up and down, but when he really validated himself and really seemed to find himself was when he fought Tony Ferguson. It was when he looked like he was going to have him in that arm bar, and he was twisting his arm in every which way, and somehow Tony Ferguson didn't tap out. Still, El Cucuy's a freak. We know that. He's probably the only one who doesn't tap out in that scenario, but doesn't. But Charles Oliveira looked dominant, and I was like, okay, so that's a pretty good fight, but we've seen good things from him before, but no consistency. Then he beats Michael Chandler, beats Poirier, beats Gaethje, and you're like, okay, hold on now, like, this guy's found it a little bit, and then having that tough loss against Islam in that fight, but we see who Islam is, right? And there's not really much of a question there.
No surprise there, unfortunately.
For sure. And in that fight, you have the Dagestani wrestling versus the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Wouldn't mind seeing that fight again, but both fighters need to get a win to even have that contention. But Oliveira's Jiu-Jitsu is some of the best, and the one thing you can say about him is that when he gets hurt, he gets wobbled, right? We've seen him get the ability to get knocked down. But what does he do? He falls on his back and relaxes because he knows there's not too many people, unless he's really hurt, that's going to jump into that guard with him. One of the best and most fun jiu-jitsu guys on the card. He's not a guy who's going to neutralize.
Unless you're Islam Makhachev, right?
Exactly.
And then that dude, he's going to get on top of anybody. It doesn't matter who you are.
It doesn't matter. But pretty much for 3/4 of the rest of the division and in the UFC, you're not jumping into that guard, right?
No.
He's not just a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's one of the most fun jiu-jitsu guys to watch because he's not just maintaining, neutralizing people. He's dominating people. He's always trying to advance.
Active.
He's active. And, he's in, a lot of guys who are wrestlers in jiu-jitsu, it's like, okay, you're boring. You're really good, but it's a boring fight. Charles Oliveira is not that guy. He's still a fan favorite with having that background in jiu-jitsu.
And I think it's worth noting that he really had this surge when he moved up to lightweight. Again, moving up in weight and finding his rhythm. Because at featherweight, like you said, it was up and down, and he fought some of the best guys, but some tough losses. And when you're depleting your body, and you see how big he is now, it's like, how the hell did you ever make 145? He's massive at 155. So all of that couldn't have helped. And so he moved up, he had this resurgence, and it was the best decision he ever made, obviously. It just makes you wonder why he didn't start there, but, he figured it out.
Right, and you see that, I remember, I was younger when, he was fighting the 145, it's 2010.
Yeah, that's true.
11.
Yeah.
So I remember watching him just a little bit because he fought, guys like Holloway. So I remember, watching him a little bit, but I didn't understand, how, much smaller he looked compared to now. And whenever you go back and rewatch it, you're like, wow, he looks extremely sucked in. And now you look at 155 and he looks huge, right? You watch him fight Michael Chandler, who Michael Chandler is a very stocky, huge, ripped guy. And Oliveira kind of stands over when he's filled in too. You're like, wow, Oliveira looks huge, against a guy even like Michael Chandler. But two guys who have had similar fights. Seem to be fighting the same guys. They both fought the Poiriers, the Gaethjes, Ferguson.
The top guys,
So all the top guys. So there's no question of what kind of output we're going to get in this fight. These guys have got it done. Wow. Can't wait for that fight. Now, a lot of people are saying that main event is what they're tuning in for. But that's mainly because they're doubting Stipe Miocic and Jon Jones. Let's go into that main event. A lot of people are kind of been a little snarky about, it should be Tom Aspinall, it should be this, should be that, and just isn't fun for Jon Jones. I'm sorry, but if you're a true UFC fan, you're so excited. You cannot miss Jon Jones in the octagon. You're going to count the number of times he's going to be back in there again. So if you're not excited to watch Jon Jones fight, then you're not a true MMA fan. You maybe just joined or something, but Jon Jones is the greatest of all time, arguably the greatest of all time. You ask Dana White, it's unarguably, but he is that guy for mixed martial arts.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is Jordan in the finals, right? You're not missing that game. You don't care who the opponent is.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to tune in for that. And so I understand some of the statements in regards to his opponent.
For sure.
And maybe rightfully so. And you got to respect Stipe to sticking to his guns, because this has kind of been Stipe's thing since back with the whole Cormier trilogy, right?
Right.
Stipe's like, no, I know what I deserve. I'm not fighting the number one contender. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. I deserve to fight for the belt. Look at my resume. You know, so if I have to hang out a couple years and go fight fighters in the meantime, then that's what I'm going to go do.
Right.
But he's gonna wait for that opponent. So hats off to him, right? He played it smart. And again, he's like you're saying, right? These are older guys now. You know, there's only so many more fights they have. So why even risk it? They have nothing to prove at this point. Nobody's doubting what Stipe brings to the table. Nobody should be doubting what Jones brings to the table. You know, now, you know, the time off is concerning. You know, and it could go either way. You know, you have guys come out here and they come back after a long layoff and they blame it on the time off. There's other guys that come back from a long layoff and they go, man, I feel great. Thank God for that layoff. I'm injury free. I got to take care of some things. So, you know, who's to say what time really plays in this? I'm just happy it's finally happening.
Yeah.
It's been way too damn long. I was heartbroken. Was it last year when he had that pec injury and I was like, oh, no way, dude. I thought instantly, all right, he's going to be out for another 2 or 3 years, because it already seemed like we're getting spoiled. If you get more than one fight out of Jones a year, you feel spoiled, right?
Right.
And
so, question.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, we're not getting that fight anytime soon. He was already talking about retirement last year. Now he's injured. Maybe he's not coming back. So he's here now. I'm excited to see it, you know, and really excited to see what Stipe brings to the game, because I've been one of those. I've been a Stipe doubter in the past, and he's proven me wrong more than a few times, you know. He's lost. He's had some losses, but he's lost guys like Ngannou, guys like Cormier. I mean, you can't knock on a guy losing to someone like that. Right. And then still pulling off victories to those exact same guys, you know? So it's still Stipe Miocic at the end of the day, you know? I mean, yes, Jones is our GOAT, but Stipe is a beast, man. You can't sleep on him. Every time, you know, I think this is it. All right, Stipe's... I don't know, for some reason, there was something that never really connected to me on a fight-to-fight basis with Stipe. But it's just consistently winning the way he did when he shouldn't have, or when he was being counted out. It's like, how do you not root for a guy like that, man?
Right. Yeah, and he's a very smart fighter. You watch the way he approached the Ngannou fight. You watch how he kept evolving in the trilogy against Daniel Cormier. You know, he's a guy that's why they've considered him the heavyweight GOAT. And, you know, and again, back to your point is, while watching him fight, I'm like, wow, this guy is really good. But it never really clicked to me that heavyweight greatest of all time. But you go back and look at his resume, and for the amount of years he's done it, and the amount of title fights he's had, 8 straight main events on pay-per-view, he's a guy who's been always there, and he's finding ways to win. His IQ is incredible, and wow, yeah, you can't doubt Stipe Miocic at any point in this fight, because not only is he a great fighter, mixes it up, but his IQ is so high, and we saw that in those bouts.
Yeah, and we're almost doing a disservice to him by calling him a knockout artist, because he's so much more than that.
Right.
Yeah, he's knocking guys out, but he's doing it in such strategic ways. It's not just a fluke. He's not just throwing haymakers out there and they're connecting, you know? He's beating guys up, beating them down, knocking them out eventually, but he's a very, very smart fighter.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's just he's never faced someone like a Jon Jones. Who has? There's only one Jon Jones. So you can't walk around saying, well, yeah, he beat this guy and he beat that. I mean, yes, he has some great victories under his belt, but for sure, Jon Jones is one of one, man. You know, and every time we see it, you know, I saw it when he did to Cyril Gane, you know? Right. Which we all thought was going to be a close fight. Oh, it's going to be a stand-up fight. This is a good game. And we saw what Jones did to that. I don't expect that to happen to Stipe by no means. No. But Jones never fails to impress. Every time we think we've seen it all with Jon Jones, and he goes out and wins the heavyweight belt, first time out, first round. I mean, come on, man. The dude is exceptional. Yep. He's fighting in his hometown. It's got so much to it, and we're gonna. And I always forget about that. Yeah, I always forget that he's from New York. Yeah. Me too.
All right, Siege. So we've broken it down a little bit. We've given, the audience a little bit of a background on each fighter. Now it's time for sharp picks. Let's get it done. Siege, you had me beat in that last card. I got 2 correct. You got 3. You're up 3-2. Let's get into the second pay-per-view. And let's start off with the first fight of the night. James Lontop versus Mauricio Ruffy.
I feel like it's an unfair pick. I mean, again, we already kind of went into what Lontop has brought to the table so far and what Ruffy did in his last fight. I got to go with Ruffy. Based on a little bit I've seen, I think that's the easiest pick.
Yeah, and easiest pick, and he's, again, the biggest favorite on the card. He's the minus 1,000 favorite to start to James Lontop.
I didn't even see that.
Plus
Holy
600.
shit.
I mean, that is by far the biggest favorite on this card. We have a couple big favorites, but not quite as big as that. Mauricio Ruffy, a huge favorite on that card. Siege, I'm going to have to agree with you. Mauricio Ruffy, his striking, the way he does it, it's so beautiful. It's pure. I mean, he seems to have fun in there. He's those fighting nerds seem to be getting up. You see him with the glasses. You see how well that team is doing. Yeah. It's hard to deny him. I'm going to go Mauricio Ruffy. His striking's going to be too much. He gets it done.
Nice.
Okay, so we're going to agree on that. We're 1-1 there. Now let's go to the next fight, that woman's bout. It's going to be Karine Silva taking on Viviane Araujo. How do you see that one going?
So again, you're the one that filled me in on that. So based on what you're saying, I'm going to go with Karine Silva.
Okay. Yep. I'm going to do the same. That's
going to be my pick.
Yep. I'm doing the same. It's that she's a young fighter. She does it all. She's very fun. Whenever you watch Araujo fight and she works in the clinch, she just isn't active enough for me. She hasn't won me over. And when you're 37 and your career and your prime is kind of getting past you, it's hard to deny a girl like Silva, completely active, versus Araujo just kind of neutralizing rather than dominating. Hasn't quite won me over there. So we're going to agree on that, Siege. Just like the last time, we're 2-2 on the same fights. Now let's get into that jiu-jitsu versus wrestling match. Paul Craig versus Bo Nickal.
I'd be surprised if you disagree with me on this one, but I'm going to go with Bo Nickal.
Okay.
I mean, his surge, I know Paul Craig needs it, but I don't know if Craig is the guy to hand Bo Nickal his first loss in the UFC. I think it's going to take the guys a few levels up from that. Love Paul Craig. Again, I love his resume and everything, but I'm going with Bo Nickal on this one.
Okay, Siege. No, I'm agreeing.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It's going to be Bo Nickal. And
that's what I thought.
The reason I'm going with him is because his striking is so much better than Paul Craig's. Right? We talked about the high wrestling, the high jiu-jitsu, but when you watch them on the feet, the level difference is huge, right? And you see jiu-jitsu guys, they work from their back, right? They want to be coming to the guard. But I think if Bo Nickal stays on his feet here, he's going to win that fight. And the first time it really kind of brought me away from Paul Craig was that Johnny Walker fight. Paul Craig versus Johnny Walker. There's a few fights after that Jamal Hill fight. And I remember going to that fight like, Paul Craig is going to kill this poor guy. Johnny Walker had all the hype, and then he kept getting knocked out. He kept getting beat. And then, so he was kind of going down. And you have Paul Craig, who just seems to be this scary guy who nobody wants to fight.
Yeah.
And then it was that body kick. Paul Craig caught the body kick, and then Johnny Walker just let him have it. And Paul Craig, for whatever reason, didn't let go of his leg and ate 6, 7, 8 unanswered punches.
Yeah.
And I was like, why'd you hold on to the leg? Like, why were you going for it so bad? Like, and I was like, okay.
Fight IQ, right? It's like, if you're punching me in the face and I can't defend it, let go of the leg. Yeah.
Right. You would think, right? And so that's what kind of threw me off from Paul Craig. Just a little bit enough for me to clearly give this one to Bo Nickal. Bo Nickal is a big favorite in that fight as well. So I think we're going to go with the audience there. So we're going Bo Nickal. We're 3 for 3. Now things get a little interesting. Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler.
All right. I don't know if this pick is necessarily going with logic, based on, their first go round.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more picking this one with my heart. I like Chandler in this fight. He's making a lot of promises. This is a new Chandler. He's had a 2-year layoff waiting on, like you mentioned earlier, waiting on the McGregor fight that never happened, And so he said he's coming in healthy. He's ready. I think the excitement's going to be there, but he keeps talking about a new Michael Chandler. We're going to see a new Michael Chandler. To me, what that means is a smarter Michael Chandler. And so if I'm right and he comes in here smarter, we already know he's explosive, he's fast, he's intelligent, when he's playing it right, and it's not just brawling. I think if we do see this new Michael Chandler and he does, let's say he rocks Oliveira and not rush in like an idiot,
Right.
I think he takes this fight. Not only that, I want to see Chandler move up because there's so much more fun fights to be made. But if he keeps losing these exciting fights, there's only so much you could do with them, So again, not as maybe a little logic in there, but more with my heart. I want to see a Chandler win because I would like to see what happens next.
Oh, that's super unfortunate, Siege. You have Charles Oliveira, who's the minus 258 favorite. You have Michael Chandler, who's the plus 210 last I saw. And so, again, my heart wants to tell. I'm a huge DuBronx fan. Huge DuBronx fan. I love Charles Oliveira. I love everything he does. But for some reason, my gut's telling me Michael Chandler. And I was really hoping you were going with the favorite there, and I was going to be able to disagree with you. But see, we're on the same page here.
Really? Wow. Okay.
And it's just because of how close Michael Chandler's been in those fights. And the thing with Michael Chandler is that first round, he is going to try to take your head off your neck. He's the big blows, and in second round, he seems to be gassed just a little bit. So if you see him bring that back a little bit and get a finish like he's been so close to, and you have Oliveira's chin, which has been a bit of a question mark.
Suspect, yep.
Yeah, it has. And so Chandler, I just see getting it done. I see him getting a knockout victory. I see it happening later in that second round. I see him, limiting himself, letting his stamina run long, and I see him getting it done. I'm super unfortunate we're agreeing on 4-4, but I see Michael Chandler getting it done and getting the upset victory with him being the underdog. I see him getting it done.
Nice.
Wow.
This is completely unscripted, by the way. So this is
wow,
normally we're not this far in together on the same, but we're on the same page.
And we were on the same page on the last card too, and we don't talk about the picks. We purposely don't talk to each other about the card. So if anybody's in the back saying, "Oh, you guys," no, we are hearing each other's answers for the first time. So there's that. We agree 4-4 here, and usually we're a bit argumentative on who we think's gonna win, and we usually disagree, and for whatever reason, this or that. Yeah. But we're 4-4 here. We're almost the same in the last one, and I don't know what's happening. See, we started this podcast together for UFC fights, and we seem to be thinking alike here. I don't like it too much. We're agreeing too much. What happened? I don't know what's going on.
It makes it too easy, but
it's too easy. But you know what, Siege? Let's get into this main event. You have Jon Bones Jones taking on Stipe Miocic here. How do you see this one going? Who gets the big victory?
I have a feeling we're going to be 5-5 because before we even get into how I give it to Jones. I mean, he's the GOAT, and I sincerely hope him winning doesn't mean it's his last fight.
Right.
But if it is, it makes it that much more of an honor that we get to partake in that. That's going to be amazing, right? But just to see Jones fight, period, is going to be amazing. I think Jones is just going to bring too much to the table. As high as Stipe's fight IQ is, you can't replicate a guy like Jones. It doesn't matter how many wrestlers you bring in, how many strikers, nobody does it and mixes it together the way Jones does. Right? I mean, when you talk about these spinning elbows and these moves that he's making up in the ring, how many times have you heard Joe Rogan say, I don't even know what to call that? He's just naming shit as it's happening, Yep. You can't replicate somebody like that because no matter how much you train, there's going to be something you didn't train for. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what Jones is going to bring to this fight more than anything is the unknowns,
Sure.
I think that's how he did. I think he just overwhelmed Stipe, and if they manage to do it again and it's a rematch, maybe it'll go a different way. But this being the first fight, I give it to Jones.
Yeah, I'm going the same way. We're going 5-5. We're going to agree on everything. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to make get a little upgrade from being down 3-2, but we're going to agree on all of them. It's going to be Jon Jones, and I think, stylistically, for both, right? Their IQ is so good, so they're going to make improvements on everything. And you heard Daniel Cormier talk about with the Miocic fight. He said he threw things at me that I just wasn't ready for. He didn't do it in the first two, and he brought this one out, and I wasn't expecting it. So, I mean, he's going to bring different things to the table, but I think Jon Jones is going to be too much. He's too big of a heavyweight. He's too strong. Yeah. He's Jon Jones. You have to pick Jon Jones until Jon Jones until he shows you otherwise where you're not to pick him. Yeah. Hasn't shown that yet. He's undefeated. He had that 12-6 elbow disqualification. Now legal. We can see him. He's been working on it. Let's see if he shows that in this fight. but I'm going Jon Jones here, Siege. Let's wrap it up here, Siege. Give me your final thoughts on the card real quick.
Brother, I don't know if there's a whole lot more to say. Excited to be there. It's been too long since our last fight outing, so bringing the little one with us, your nephew, my son, his first fight. Can you ask for a better first fight? If it's the last fight he ever sees, this is the one that he needs to be there for. So just super excited to be there with the family, man. I can't wait.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
Count the hours at this point. So
yeah,
let's go. Let's speed this up.
I can't wait. The flight, I can't wait to go. The whole family's going to be there. It's going to be great. Getting to see Jon Jones. UFC 309, Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. That card is so much fun. It's going to be another great time. We're going to be there live. We're going to give you guys a live look while we're there, so stay tuned for that one. Live shows in New York City, New York at Madison Square Garden for UFC 309 once again. It's been CJ Sharp, Nico Sharp here for another episode of Sharp Segments as we break down UFC 309. Make sure, what is Jon Jones going to do next? Does he retire after that fight? Let us know in the comments. Who do you want to see Jon Jones fight next? How do you see the fight going? Did you agree with us? Did you disagree with us? Let us know in the comments. We cannot wait to see it. We're going to be there live. We'll see you guys next time.